You're listening to Unclipped, covering all things LA Clippers.
Welcome back to Unclipped. I'm your host, Casey Kasliner, covering the LA Clippers from Intuit Dome as the LA Clippers lose to the Phoenix Suns in their third matchup of the season. LA loses 114-103 at Intuit Dome, and the Clippers just look disjointed right now. It's really hard to say where this team is right now in terms of an identity. It was a loss that felt like the Clippers just kind of ran out of steam at the end. They were able to cut it close in the fourth quarter after a really strong third quarter performance from the Clippers, but it just wasn't enough. And without Kawhi Leonard, this team looks a lot different. The Clippers fall to 3-6, and we learned pregame that Kawhi will miss the next few games with an ankle sprain. We don't know the severity of this injury. Ty Lue did not say if it was a high ankle sprain that could change things, but nonetheless, the Clippers need him right now. They're lacking his IQ, his play on the perimeter defensively. They gave up a lot of threes tonight, and of course, his ability to shoot from mid-range and get inside. I mean, Kawhi can just not escape the injury bug, and Ty Lue talked about it post-game. He said they're used to this. They've been in this position before, as Kawhi Leonard has dealt with so many injuries in his career, but it just feels like right now the Clippers do not have much of an identity, like I said, but beyond that, they're losing games against teams that are not necessarily deep contenders. A team like Phoenix, they torched the Clippers the other night in Phoenix with Jalen Green coming back and having an absolutely monster game for Phoenix, and he had 29 in that game. He comes back in this game, of course, expecting to have a big role, and then gets injured after 7 minutes. So the Clippers had, 41 minutes of Jalen Greenless Phoenix Suns competition and could not capitalize on that. And I believe it's a re-injured hamstring for Green, so you have to hope he's okay. Such a dynamic young player. But the Clippers could not do anything to stop Phoenix, especially early on in this game. The Clippers were terrible from the three-point line. They were 1 for 14 at halftime from beyond the arc. And when it was all said and done, they were able to hit some in the second half. When it was all said and done, they shot 30%, so not bad, but they gave up 16 three-pointers on 38 attempts from Phoenix, 42% from beyond the arc for the Suns. The Suns also shot 21 free throws, made 18 of them. Clippers only shot 61% from the line, 11 of 18. I mean, just not good. Talk about the rebound differentiation as well. 42-27 in terms of the Suns leading in rebounds, but offensive boards, 13-5. Zubac was the only guy that could buy an offensive rebound. And I want to talk about him as well in a moment. He led the Clippers in scoring with 21 points. Devin Booker is the one to lead Phoenix with 21 points as well. He was 5 for 5 from the charity stripe. But the Clippers just could not contain a Phoenix team that just consistently played with 10 guys throughout this game. Probably would have liked to play with 11, but Jalen Green got hurt. And the Clippers only played with 9 guys in the rotation. Good to see Cam Christie get some minutes, some big minutes for him as well. Had 18, 8 points for him off the bench. I mean, John Collins continues to be an elite six-man for the Clippers, even though, I think he should be starting. John Collins not in the starting lineup for the Clippers, and it's not to say their starting lineup is bad. Derrick Jones Jr., Zubac, Harden, Beal, Dunn. But at the end of the day, they're only getting double figures on any given night from 3 of those guys. And I know it's hard to ask for more sometimes, but Derrick Jones Jr. was pretty cold in this game. 2 for 7 from the field. Couldn't really buy a shot. He was 0 for 4 from beyond the arc. I like Derrick Jones Jr. a lot as a player. I think he's a sound defender. I think he's a very clean player usually. Doesn't get in foul trouble. But he's not always consistent. And, he's a guy that's consistently averaged double figures this year. That's been good. But in those big moments, you can't necessarily lean on him to step up. And again, I don't think he necessarily should lose his starting spot, but you look at John Collins averaging, 13 points per game. It's a little bit, of a head scratcher on why John Collins isn't starting. A guy who did get the start tonight, who has filled in for Kawhi in that starting 5, is Chris Dunn. He also didn't have a great game offensively, but at least he had the defense. He had 2 steals in this game. He's diving for loose balls. I feel like Chris Dunn is a guy who does a lot off the stat sheet. So that's one thing that they can hang their hats on. But he had 5 fouls as well. That was one thing that was just kind of hurtful for the Clippers, just allowing that many free throws, allowing Denver to take the pace of the game. The only guy that was positive plus minus in the starting lineup was Brad Beal. He played 20 minutes, not that much playing time for a starter, had 12 points. Obviously, he's had up and down season this year with, dealing with an injury as well. So, yeah, that's just, a big part of the Clippers is just inconsistency in the starting lineup, and they've changed their starting lineup quite a bit. That's on Ty Lue, but, they have to find some continuity, especially at home where, they started the year last year 0-4 at home to start the year, at the new arena, but they're, not been great at home this year as well. The road has been worse, but a 3-6 record where the Clippers have now lost 4 games in a row, lost every game this week, and all 3 of their wins are at home, but they dropped 2 home games this week, one of which by 1 point to Miami, a game that they, should have capitalized in, and then losing to Phoenix and Oklahoma City, and then a short trip to Phoenix. So 4 losses, and Zubac really did a good job these past 2 games in leading the Clippers. And that was coming off, a couple of games for Zoo where, he wasn't super involved offensively. In that Miami game, Oklahoma City game, he's under 10 points. He only shot a handful of attempts from the field. So good to see him get more involved. He's always going to be good defensively. He's always going to get rebounds. He's had double-figure rebounds the last 2 games. He had a double-double tonight, but you got to make sure he's involved every night, and he was tonight. But again, without Kawhi, you got to fill that void with more than just your starting center being the main contributor, because he's not going to necessarily catch a ton of lobs. He's not going to necessarily shoot from outside the paint. I really liked Brook Lopez early off the bench. I was kind of surprised he didn't get more looks. That's sort of on Ty Lue as well. He was kind of having a heat check, hitting from mid-range, hitting from inside. 8 points for Lopez in 13 minutes. A thing with the Clippers and head coach Ott talked about this for the Suns is, the Suns were not going to have the size advantage in this game. So, to see the Clippers not necessarily run with Lopez a whole lot in this game was a little surprising. I know when you're down pretty much the entire game, you have to roll with the starters and make sure you get the most out of them. But Brook Lopez was very good. The largest lead for the Suns was 18 points. The Clippers cut that down to single digits after the third quarter, outscoring Phoenix 34-25 in the third quarter. But surprising. The Clippers are usually bad in the third quarter. That's been their Achilles heel this season. They've struggled in that frame, but in the fourth, they're outscored by 6. It was a close one in that fourth quarter, but the difference was Phoenix hitting their threes. Mark Williams had a fantastic game for Phoenix, their center. He's a guy that's defensively minded, but for him to put up 19 points, get 6 boards, 2 steals as well, only 2 blocks for the Suns, and they both came off the bench from Nick Richards. It's just a really head-scratching game from the Clippers. A game that, on paper, even without Kawhi, they have the height advantage. They should, at home be able to put up more of a fight, but it just felt like they played slow. They played a little bit soft. They weren't able to control the pace of this game. And, for how good James Harden was, he started this game slow. He was 4-15 from the field. He did have 13 points, played 41 minutes, also had 13 assists, so a double-double for him. But, 2 of 10 from three-point range just isn't going to cut it. He was also minus 18. That was the worst on the Clippers. And, again, they didn't have Chris Paul play this game. They didn't have either Kobe Brown or Kobe Sanders, both Kobe's, play in this game. So, they're running with a short bench, and that's why it was important to have Cam Christie step up, scoring late in the game and, being a contributor. But, it's just, if you're a Clippers fan, it's very disappointing to see, how much experience and star power the Clippers have, and just for it to kind of run out of gas. And I don't know if I'm super surprised. This team is older. They're a team that, needs a jolt of energy. Some player like Cam Christie to maybe step up and get more minutes, and I liked his play, but it's just not going to cut it against a Phoenix team that was thriving from beyond the arc. Another guy that really stepped up off the bench for Phoenix, Colin Gillespie, 13 points off the bench. He was 4 of 13 from the field, but hit 4 3-pointers. That was tied for the most on Phoenix. Another guy who had 4 3-pointers for Phoenix and a clutch late one that was pretty much the dagger to seal it for the Suns was Royce O'Neal off the bench. He had 29 minutes off the bench, was the 6th man tonight for the Suns, had 7 rebounds, and then Grayson Allen. Again, you can't let guys like that just, shove it down your throat. And Allen had 4 threes in 7 attempts as well. So the efficiency was key for the Suns, and they were very efficient. And again, this was the Suns' first road win. of the season. So, they've struggled on the road. Obviously, the Suns lost badly to the Clippers in the home opener for LA, lost by 27 points. Of course, we know that the Clippers had more depth back then. They had 8 assists from Chris Paul in that home opener. So that kind of speaks to that. Obviously, of course, also having Kawhi Leonard in that game, but they just didn't have him tonight. He's going to be out for a little bit. And, Kawhi Leonard's a guy that's been injured a lot of his career. It's unfortunate, but it's something you have to deal with if you're the Clippers. That part of it is not Ty Lue's fault, but the lineup inconsistencies. John Collins was great tonight. I think he should earn a starting spot after a game like this. Where you put him, that's up to you. If you're Ty Lue, you're lucky that you have 2 big men that are very solid in Zubac and Brook Lopez. So, you have a little bit more wiggle room. I also really liked Nick Batum tonight. He had a few clutch threes. All 3 of his, field goal makes were from beyond the arc. He had 9 points off the bench in 25 minutes. Some really clutch blocks as well. Had 2 blocks, co-led the team. But I like Chris Dunn enough to be in the starting lineup, even if the scoring touch isn't there. His defense is there. But it was a cold game from Derrick Jones Jr., and I think you maybe reevaluate a little bit. There were some questions in the press conference about that, and Ty Lue was a little bit vague. Derrick Jones Jr. is 6'6", 210 pounds. John Collins, 6'9", 226. Like, it's not like Derrick Jones Jr. is filling a role that John Collins can't. I think John Collins is an elite player. He's still very good. At his age, he's very efficient. 28-year-old player, but he's playing like he's a lot younger than that, and his defense is really solid as well. I think he's one of the more well-rounded players on the Clippers. He's been in double figures each of his last 5 appearances. He's averaging 14 points the month of November. I can keep going. John Collins is a stud. He had 19 points off the bench. He needs to play more. He did lead bench players in points, and he actually did have more points than Derrick Jones Jr., but the point I'm making with the starting lineup is you need a tone setter when you don't have Kawhi. You need a guy that can come in and punch the opponent in the mouth. And Phoenix came out scoring in this game, and the Clippers were cold. They were shooting poorly from beyond the arc. They were missing free throws. So you need a tone setter like John Collins and to come in. And if he can't thrive in the starting lineup, then you reevaluate and put him back in the bench where he's done very well this year and refine his role. But you're not putting the panic button on yet if you're the Clippers, but you need to figure out which guy can fit into what role and establish an identity. I've said it multiple times tonight on this show, but you have to find guys that can really carve out a role for themselves, like a Zubac, a guy who knows what he can do every night and be consistent, even if he has a couple of shaky games here and there. So, it's just frustrating if you're the Clippers. You'll have a tough slate of games coming up, tough schedule, as, the Clippers, they need to just take advantage of these games at home and figure out, what they're good at and really just play calmer, and also play quicker. They'll play Atlanta on Monday, a team that just beat the Lakers in a blowout, then Denver, then they'll go to Dallas, Boston, Philly, and for, really big road trip that'll end back in LA, but not at Intuit Dome at Crypto. So a big road trip coming up for the Clippers after 2 more at home. The schedule's only getting tougher. They're going to have to lock in, have to, win some games without Kawhi if they want to not have their season go off the rails. This was Unclipped, my post-game reaction to this one over the Phoenix Suns. Clippers lose in a tightly contested game at the end, but a 114-103 triumph for Phoenix. Let me know your thoughts on this game as the Clippers drop to 3-6. I'll see you in the next one, and have a great rest of your night.